Motoko, thank you. Thank you for your concert. It was very beautiful. And I wanted to ask you something about the relation with what you played. Which relation has with jazz? Does your music have some relation with jazz?
Sì, sì, sì. Io molto piacere
Uh-huh.
jazz, sì, sì. Io ho studiato 10 anni and more. And, but combining
Okay.
with the... I try not to think what kind of music I'm playing every time I play. Try not to think.
You're free. You said before that improvisation has a particular life. You said something very beautiful about improvisation. Can you repeat this?
In the background?
Yeah. When you
Yeah, well, the improvisation, sometimes we think, especially experimental or the free improvisation, sometimes people think it's maybe a little too hard to listen, but I believe it is actually a most basic art, um, form of art, the music, that everybody should be able to understand.
The last question is about your relation with your culture. How much of Japanese is in your music?
That's a very good question. Um, I grew up in Japanese culture. Um, un momento.
No problem.
Un momento.
Is,
I,
no, is there Japanese way of jazz? A Japanese way of jazz?
Possibly, but I grew up in Japan studying classical music, the first. And classical music influenced me to think more Western.
Okay.
And I remember when I came to Europe for the first time, I actually felt I'm home. I suddenly understood all those years I was practicing music was born here in Europe, and it started to make sense because the sound works with the building, architecture, and weather and landscape. So, and also jazz. So the classical, I had more, how to say, in Japan I studied more classical. Very interesting. And in America I studied the jazz. I never studied jazz in Japan, so I don't know how they study, but I studied jazz in America. But most importantly, I listened a lot of real players playing live. I listened a lot of live concerts, and I think I really understand what jazz is in various forms. I listened to traditional jazz, to progressive jazz, to free jazz, and I believe jazz is actually each person must find a language of their own. Then finally, it's a language which we can call jazz, I believe. And so I probably don't know much about Japanese jazz, but I understand American jazz. And as for the Japanese influence, I think it's just who I am. And especially recent years, I think a lot about my home and how I grew up and who I am, and that really influenced to the music. And I think after all, I realized I'm not completely classical pianist, not completely jazz pianist, and I'm just who I am. And maybe just a little bit to Japanese. 19 years I spent there is in there, and I don't know how many years I'm in the States, probably about 15 years in the States, traveling, meeting a lot of people, listening a lot of different kind of music, and I hope that comes out. Everything comes out when I try to be true to myself. I think that's the most important thing, and be in the moment. That's my focus right now. Just try to be in the moment.
these moments we lived with you were very beautiful.
Molto grazie, grazie mille.
Grazie a te.